In today's clip, I want to address why I'm totally all for reparations for African Americans and why that is, even though slavery has not much of an explicit effect on me personally. Okay. Hey, XenPuck here. Another day not working for the man. Sometimes I think my boss might take, my old boss, might take some offense when I say that bit, but honestly, sir, it's not aimed at you. It's aimed at the corporate culture that we all toil under, and in my case, toiled in the past tense under. So now that we have a non-orange douche as president, one of the most controversial items I've heard from the Democratic side was consideration for reparations for African Americans. I'm guessing some of this is driven by the rise of BLM as a movement and such. So today I want to go over exactly why I'm all for reparations and how much I'm personally willing to pony up as part of taxes and any such logistical matters, okay? But first, some qualifications as to who I am, right? Obviously, I'm not white or black. There's 0 persons in my personal history that has had slaves. Since I'm an immigrant from only 20 years ago, my entire family in this country have only been here for 2 to 3 decades. Yet I'm saying I'm totally fine with contributing to right or wrong from 200 to 300 years ago, right? Or a little bit longer than that for the history of slavery. Here, I want to make it clear why, right? This is because we live in a society that's bigger than all of us, right? It's a society that currently is the strongest on the planet. But just because my family hasn't been here for a few centuries doesn't mean that I want to minimize what happened during the entirety of its history, right? I'm also a math nerd and I've hit financial independence, so you know what else I really believe in? Compound interest. So yeah, African American slaves were here since the beginning, and whether they were slave or not, their contributions should have compounded like a snowball over the handful of generations up until now. So even if I didn't personally own any slaves, that doesn't mean that I'm not benefiting from a society that clearly derive a great deal of base level and infrastructure benefits from said free labor force in the past, right? Number 2, since today I'm arguing for the pro-reparations side, it's easier to just refute some general against reparations argument. So I found a lovely article from a public university, I believe, that covers a lot of the generic points in the against case, and I feel like it's really easy to refute some of these very quickly. I will read them to you. There's like top 10 reasons, and I'll link the article in the descriptions below, right? Here are the 10 against arguments. Let's see if I can refute most, if not all of them, right? Number 1, there's no single group clearly responsible for the crime of slavery. That's true. Let's be clear, Europeans weren't the only ones responsible for how the system of slavery worked in the transatlantic slave trade, right? Some African nations were responsible too. However, I live in the USA, and the US government do not have jurisdiction over African countries. So we have to start somewhere. Why not start from the literal richest country in the world, right? Number 2, there's no one group that benefited exclusively from its fruits. What? How is this an objection? That's like saying, hey, we shouldn't build parks because there's not a single group who would benefit exclusively from it. No one has to. Slavery created benefits for the entire country of the economic cycle, right? Why would it need to be limited down to any specific group? Okay. Number 3, only a tiny minority of white Americans ever owned slaves, and others gave their lives to free them. Sure, that's true, but since human beings are pretty dumb, the effects of looking like a slave still permeates through our society even now. The same with being white, right? Even if you didn't own slaves, just being white gives you a heads up, right? I'm not saying that anyone should be apologetic for being the race that they're born in, but it's a level of privilege that continues to exist, right? Number 4, America today is a multi-ethnic nation, and most Americans have no connection, direct or indirect, to slavery. Okay. Like I said, personally, I have no connection to slavery in any way or form, but I still recognize that I'm benefiting from the legacy of the work that African American slaves did simply by moving to the USA and living here, even in the modern era, right? Number 5, the historical precedents used to justify the reparations claims do not apply, and the claim itself is based on race, not injury. Honestly, this one hard to refute, right? That's true. Somebody like Obama wouldn't have technically been a slavery descendant and thus not eligible for reparations. However, I want to say I'm fine with defining injury broadly because even for Obama, who's technically half white, he's never seen as white in the USA, right? That's how racist this country is generally, even compared to other North American or American counterparts, right? I honestly find it kind of amusing. Someone who's half white and half black will always only be seen as black in the USA, when at least mathematically speaking, he should be able to claim to be either. Oh well, can't change the psychology of a country, right? Point number 6. The reparation argument is based on the unfounded claim that all African American descendants of slaves suffer from the economic consequences of slavery and discrimination. Oh my, whether all African American descendants suffered or not, or to the same degree, is irrelevant, right? We've only seen instances when even black superstars in sports or like judges from courts are still being profiled against. Isn't that enough? Right? It literally doesn't matter what level of wealth or status they've achieved. The general consensus is still that of suspicions and otherness, despite African Americans being just as American as the people who came on the Mayflower. So what group should be excluded then, based on the views alone? Number 7. The reparation claim is one more attempt to turning African Americans into victims. It sends a damaging message to the African American community. This one is the one that I feel like is hardest to argue against, but hey, if I'm being a cynic, some people say the Democrats already treat African Americans as victims at every turn. So why not give them some money for it? We all like cash, right? Number 8, reparations to African Americans have already been paid. When? Where? What? This is a stupid point. Like, when? When was it ever been paid? Don't think I've ever seen this happen at all. This is absurd, okay? Number 9, what about the debt blacks owe to America? Oh my god, what the what now? What do blacks owe to a country that basically got them through kidnapping? Like, how tone deaf is whoever who wrote this, right? It's like saying, hey, I freed my pet after realizing that it wasn't happy in captivity. Why can't it be thankful? First of all, a human being isn't a pet, obviously, right? And the fact that they were here against their will should have never, ever happened to begin with. So no, black people don't owe this country anything for being freed, right? That's like writing an injustice that shouldn't have never happened to begin with, right? It should have just been common sense. So why do they owe America anything, right? For being kidnapped. Talk about blaming the victim. Oh my god. Number 10, the reparations claim is a separatist idea that sets African Americans against the nation that gave them freedom. Again, see last point, okay? The nation that gave African Americans freedom was the same one that enslaved them to begin with, right? How hard is it to understand that simply righting a wrong doesn't, get you a deserved pat on the back? Just reading these against the argument makes me physically sick to my stomach, actually. The level of stupidity and privilege that just seems very, very commonly seeping through, it's explicit. It's explicit, right? If not downright, straight up racist. Okay. Now, let me get back to my final point, which is, well, how much should reparations be, right? Well, the amount that I'm comfortable with is quite high. I've seen figures like 30, 50K, 100K, 300K. To be honest, I'll support up to $1 million per household. Is that enough, considering that the mean, actually, I think it's the median household net worth in this country. It's about 300K. So 3 times that level should be the ceiling. That about covers it, right? And I'm still a fiscal conservative. So what should we cut to pay this extra, I think, about $10 trillion in expenses? Here's where my capitalism will show, right? I'm totally fine with raising taxes on everyone, since the responsibility isn't specifically to any particular group. Everyone should chip in. Yes, including African Americans, okay? Now, if you're black, you get back either a few hundred G's to $1 million at the end of the year. Still a pretty good deal, right? I mean, it totally works for me, especially if it's taxed on income, right? It won't affect me one bit, because I don't really make any income anymore. That's the selfish part of me, okay? And obviously, of course, I'm all for reparations because I hate racism, and if reparations happen, that would mean we can finally put a dollar figure on what we owe black people for their contribution to the greatness that is the USA. After all, I do believe that the USA is a great and fantastic nation, and I do believe that African slaves had a significant contribution to get this country to the level of superstardom that it enjoys to this day, the status, right? However, I want to mention this, right? Just like a company that starts to show profit will be judged according to more standard metrics rather than startup unicorn speculative math, right? Once you put a value on what your contribution was, that's what reparations would do for you, okay? I can assume that after reparations of whatever amount it ends up being is handed out, then all claims of racism within our lovely country and culture should be gone, right? Subside, dissipate. Do you think that's gonna happen? To me, the likelihood of actual reparations happening is directly and exactly proportional to the percentage of the disenfranchised who would be willing to no longer claim racism as a source of their problems. That is to say, it's most likely slim to none, okay? Because that would require an entire shift in mentality and somehow equating in simple dollar terms, you know, from the dollars to a generational-wide mental shackle. So while I think this idea of a reparation is lovely, okay, theoretically all for it, I'm not sure anyone can actually be bought out of the idea of racism with just money, right? So that'd be the dream, wouldn't it? Because then, maybe as a nation, we can finally move forward, you know, past the mistakes of the past and into the future where maybe we can all do better. That's just my 2 cents. Obviously, just an opinion. Don't get too mad, internet. Cheers. Till next time.